everyone. Welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and today it is my honor to be able to have a wonderful author with us, Miss Margaret Young. Margaret is the author of Willow from the Willows,
Oopsie.
Almondtown, Bright Summer, and How Else Can We Know What's Beautiful? Margaret, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Margaret, tell us a little bit about yourself, and in particular, your writing journey.
Okay. Um, I grew up in an artistic family. My mom was an curator of art, and my dad was a poet and a teacher. And I thought, well, I started writing when I was really little. It just sort of came to me. But when I grew up or got towards growing up, I was like, I'm not going to be a poet because that's lame and unoriginal. And my dad has always been supportive of my work, and I've always admired his work. But I kind of needed to at least believe I was taking a break. So I thought I'd do theater, and then I thought I would do, when I thought, okay, I'm a writer, I did prose, I did essays, and I sort of worked on that plus poetry in grad school. And then the poetry got, more kind of accepted, getting out in magazines, and the essays kind of stalled. And yeah, the agent gave up, and it was like, okay, or the
No.
agent actually quit,
Oh
stopped being an
no.
agent. So yeah, so I'm a poet. And yeah, um, I grew up in Oberlin, Ohio. My dad taught at the college. My family traveled. And yeah, I just grew up a reader, and um, poetry was a natural way to express myself. It was like, oh yeah, that's what you do sometimes.
What drew you to actually writing as a poetry type form?
Um, I think the first thing I focused on in poetry, and I would say it's still a big part of my poetry, is just observation. I look at something, I experience it with my senses, and I try to get something about it, capture it. There's now kind of philosophy and science that talks about the object, that there's it's not just the observer and the object, it's this exchange of being. So yeah, description of usually the natural world, but not always human. And then I would say two-thirds are, there's an I, or an expression of myself, a version of myself, but then one-third are some other, like other characters or something more. Yeah, not a subject. That's me. So a bit of both.
What topics though are you just absolutely drawn to? Like you feel like that you cannot wait to express them in writing.
Nature.
But in terms of nature, like, what about it makes you passionate? What do you find is important to you to share?
Um, People's relationship. I actually talk about the Tang Dynasty poet that my a set of poets that my dad translated, where here and there, there's an expression of transience or loss or joy, but the focus is on the thing. And so something, and it's usually beautiful, but sometimes beautiful ugly, something that's worth paying attention to. And so it's about that act and about sort of the human tendency towards that act.
Have you a writing process? Do you go out and, um, do paper and pen and nature, or how do you formulate all your writing?
I always start with the pen and paper. And usually it's not out in my subject matter, but back in my study or out at the cafe. And often a sort of bare bones of the poem will come out as I'm writing. But sometimes I write a mess, a free write, and then I go back and say, oh, yeah, that's something that I want to use.
Do you ever incur any challenges when you're writing, Margaret? And if you do, how do you overcome them?
Um, think just output. I think I wish I did more. Like I've had periods in my life where I did more, and there are things like, when I was in grad school and I had to turn one in every week. Um, so the way I overcome that, I did one of those poem a month things. This was for Tupelo Press, so I had to publish, period. And so I did, yeah, one of my favorite things to do is take someone else's poem, preferably not famous, often not originally in English, was helpful, and just kind of turn it inside out, substitute this word for that, this word for that, and until you have a brand new poem that keeps the sort of structure and grammar. So yeah, that helps a lot. I highly recommend everybody do it because it's good to get knock you out of your groove, which you always
And
need to.
well, and especially the fact that you love to write someone, revamp someone's work in a different language. That's pretty challenging. Do you
Yeah.
find that you um, ever um, are at a loss to be able to understand it? I mean, what are the tools that you use to help you translate that work?
Well, I can't imagine doing it for a writer who's no longer with us unless I had a really good um, uh, speaker of Spanish, preferably a poet. But well, first, lovely Google Translate gives me the first version, and then I patch that up. And usually, as I'm doing that, I'm starting to listen and try and notice, how poetry happens. Everything has to not just make sense, but to have I don't know how to describe it. Sound like a poem, flow and pattern. Um, but if I get stuck, and sometimes it's just a word or a word in that particular context that I need to ask about, I've asked the writers, and all three of the people I've worked with have enough English to say, okay, this is what I meant by it.
Because it's just so neat if you have someone that actually can speak the language and loves poetry as much as you do, and the way that you can be together, it's just really lovely. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you do that. Margaret, tell me about are there any musicians or artists or poets whose work that you have grown to admire?
So I wrote down some poets. And if one goes way back, I would definitely say Chinese poetry of Tang Dynasty, or those guys. That's an influence for um, being plain and just letting the thing talk. um, and yeah, more contemporary. I love CD Wright. I'm sorry we lost her so early. And then I ran to Charles Wright, who was a friend of my dad, and he has such an enormous body of work that, yeah, picking and choosing among his techniques and tricks. Then I have some 20th century poets that I have to give props to, and again, this is Marianne Moore, everybody who could be on that list, but I'm naming a couple poets that might not be as well known, and I think they should be. Russell Edson, prose poet, he sort of helped kind of get Americans taking prose poetry seriously, and he is always in working with the absurd, or just like so knowing a poem can be just a strange little scene that couldn't possibly exist, with things talking maybe that don't exist. Yeah, I love him, and I love what he did. And then back to, again, I say nature in quotes because um, philosophically, I believe everything is nature. Nature is God. There's no such thing as nature, but it's a good shorthand. And that's Robert Francis, who was a contemporary of Robert Frost, but was much more. Well, he lived by himself in a cabin in Western or Amherst, Massachusetts, for most of his life. He did like a um, uh, fellowship or something in Rome, but he lived there, and he is really direct. Again, I like that plainness, but also the sharpness of observation. He really, takes you to a particular thing, and yeah, you're there. And then just throwing in a couple of less contemporary and contemporary poets from other languages, just because that's again my propensity. Um, Although I do have to say, Pablo Neruda kind of helped me turn a corner in my writing in a way that C.D. Wright does. But other Paul Celan, another one that my father translated, and Thomas Transtromer. That's the one truly contemporary poet I can name, but I love his work.
Well, and speaking of work, Margaret, would you read some of your beautiful work for us? Love to hear
Sure
it.
enough. All right. Well, I have my newest book. My next book after that is a full length with a lot of really old poems in it. I kind of mixed it up, but I will start with the ones that people could get their hands on, ordering, preferably through the publisher. All right, this is the poem that starts off this collection. How else? Well, we know how else can we know what's beautiful? And it's called Ritual. Mark a circle on the earth. Start digging. Dig until you're deep enough you can't see the surface unless you climb out. Keep digging until you reach another substance, water, gold, oil. While you're digging, sing about how hard it is, how your ancestors dug their way to freedom, even if they didn't. Go deeper. Hit a rock. Hit several. Dig until you fall down. Sleep a while with worms in your hair, grit in your socks, paintings of bones inside your brain.
Margaret, what made you write that poem?
Um, so many of these that are more kind of not me. I don't want to say mystical, but a little bit, you know, not, yeah, not metaphysical. um, uh, I'm not sure how they come. I find them in a notebook and I'm like, oh my, yeah, this one I really don't remember, but that often happens to me that I find a poem or just write without knowing where it came from. And I know that sounds woo woo, but
No, a lot of people say they hear the poetry in their heart and then they write it down.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So I'm a read. This is, yeah, a sort of not me talking, but a first person. Dragon World. I want one of those dogs that fits into a teacup. I want to carry it in my cargo pants pocket like a sack of mixed nuts. On one side of the hill, tin shacks cling. On the other, paper airplanes settle among the shameless cactus blossoms. Why my sinuses? Is there a saint for that? Why expansion? Why acceleration? Can you feel it too? When I was 7, I talked to God, also a small silver dragon that came up from its dragon world each night. Yeah, the poet friend who said that's the name, Dragon World, of the poem. Again, it's hard for me to see, but um, sort of being in the space of the liminal or the sacred. And it's not like, a God belief, but more trying to sense and describe an other, which you can't.
it's very hard to.
This is one of those poems where I took the structure. So it's a very nice, simple structure. Um, and yeah, it's after Alan Michael Parker. who's a poet I worked with a little bit in Pennsylvania. If only this tea were icier, if only the hills were salt. The idea here is to dissolve, says the water, or to wave at the horizon, say the trees, or to hum until our socks get dry, until the sunset disagrees. The idea here is to gaze, says the window. What's going down? Asks the frog in every rhyme, he who spends all summer chanting Om. Hey, the kids in the basement have killed a spider. The idea here is to fade gracefully, says the light. If you remembered what you needed, would you recognize it now? Asks the window. The chickens roost inside the past. You'll understand someday, says the dirt. Cool dirt, says the dirt. Over here, says the horizon.
I love that one, especially when it says, and the chickens will roost in the past. I love
Yeah.
it. That is such a great line. Margaret, where do you come up with that? That's so cool.
I don't know. I was reading that just now and I'm like, that makes no sense at all. All right, I'll read two more from this volume. And I'm reading this one just because um, I often talk about pop culture and celebrate it. So there's a good example. Telemundo Univision. Nursing, shelling peas one-handed, arcade fire suburbs turned up, and telenovelas on mute. Duelo de pasiones, dos amores de Ana. A man falls from a horse, scared by a rattlesnake. A woman staggers, hugely pregnant, across a footbridge. The pigtailed girl pulls a knife on the man in the cowboy hat. The lovers kiss in water to their waists. The villainess is always blonde. The wounded man cries out for Emilio. All right, and you had asked about theater, so I have a couple of theater set poems in this one. Anxiety. Oh, and this is a prose poem. Anxiety. I dream I'm due on stage in 10 minutes. The dress they've given me has holes. There's also something yellow. Are we sure we're not doing period costume? There's this white lace one, but it's see-through and there's nothing to wear under it. And where's that script? I should really look it over. One study says warriors are better prepared for life. They take fewer risks, and risks are dangerous. I wasn't anxious until my 30s. When I turned 30, I played a series of 18-year-olds, starting with Cecily in The Importance of Being Earnest. She imagines her way out of her pink rose garden, writes true love into being.
Margaret, let me talk about, you mentioned your PA connection and your theater. So, what was it like starting the Open Door Theater Company and performing those plays in small PA communities?
It was hard, but most of all fun. It was hugely rewarding. I never would have done something like that without like people I really liked saying, hey, let's do this. And I'm not that brave, but I went along with them. And I like to sum it up in that I think everyone in their early 20s should sort of tap into that enormous early 20s energy and do something where you will inevitably fail and you'll learn how to fail and you'll start thinking you can do anything and you can do anything, but you also will fail. Um, Something that's sort of out of your grasp.
Hmm.
And we made wonderful friends. The people who came to work with us were just amazing people, and we were welcomed. And some of our plays were, you know, not as good as others, but the ones we did as collaborations with the people, which was the model we were working with, yeah, I'm moved when I think back at them. They were special. I was still overwhelmed when I was in grad school with the enormity and just hugeness of that experience. So I found an angle that kind of tied things together and felt like, I could tell it. And that was food. Being with other people your age in strange places with not enough money. Um, and discovering, oh wow, I really like pie. So yeah, that's how I wrote about it. But yeah, that was fun.
Tell me about like if you were to have lunch with one of your Shakespearean characters, where would you go and who would you be with?
By one of mine, one that I played a sort of foolish Andrew Aguecheek. I played Hero, who actually I would have to play Hero because she was my most difficult character. Um, the fun character in Much Ado About Nothing, the fun woman is Beatrice. She gets the fun plot, and Hero gets the creating tension, difficult plot. And viewers see her as passive. Why did she forgive this awful thing that this guy did? And we don't get her. Um, she's a cipher, and pisses off us feminists. Like, how could she?
Right.
Or she's just her one fun scene is cut because you have to cut something, and she really kind of fades in the background. So the work I did to sort of justify her actions, I did a lot of work because one works on something, and I created a version of her that I could kind of get, but it would be really interesting to meet the person that Shakespeare had in mind, that would
Exactly.
love someone so much that she forgave him for doing a really bad thing.
It's really hard when you talk about forgiveness because the impact that not only does it have on the person that you forgive, who may never even know you forgave them, but the impact that it has on you is just profound.
Yeah.
I think of Corey Ten Boom and how she talks about how she forgave the prison guard, when
Mm,
she was in the prison camp. Um, we don't know what we're capable of until we are faced with that situation, sounds like.
yeah.
But Margaret, where would you go with her? Like, where would you take her? Like, if you had this beautiful character, where would you take her? What would be your go-to place to chat with her and just find out a little bit more about her and yourself, maybe?
I had been thinking about other characters before I was told I had to do one that I played. So those were both on the beach with a picnic. Um, but I think that would also be a good place to take Hero, because we never see her out in nature. We see her in these palace rooms, and yeah, everybody frees up or thinks about things in a different way when they're right in front of the ocean.
True. Um, Tell me, are you currently working on any project? I believe that I read that you have something coming up, a collection of poetry. Can you talk
Yep.
about that?
Yeah. Um, it's it's called Water Bear, and it consists of a regular size manuscript that I had accepted, and they said they wanted it going from 60 to 90 pages. So rather than write a bunch of new stuff, I looked at this older manuscript where I had plenty of poems I still liked. And so I just kind of mushed them together.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm excited about that because it's really like a my whole career book. It's like poems that the world hasn't seen before, but it's kind of a range of what I've done. Um, and Yeah, excited about that. It'll be good to revisit it because once I finish a book, I'm like, I don't want to read it. I don't want to look at it until it's time.
Can you tell
Um,
about how you came up with the title? It's very intriguing. Water Bear.
oh, I had the poem where it did. Again, someone in my poetry group said, "There's your title right there," or maybe I thought of it. This is called "The One and the Many." Worms on our bathroom sink were tiny, but not as tiny as worms on the floor of the bathroom in Korea. See one, then you see them all. The Jehovah Witnesses pamphlet had an article about the water bear, the microscopic creature that lives everywhere there's water and can curl into a ball impenetrable, wait out drought or radiation, praising God. They didn't actually write that last bit. There was no mention of the water bear's ability to pray, but they did recommend readers praise a creator of such abundance, such resilience. I think I changed the line because I think resilience is overused, of such intricate abundance.
Mm.
Yeah, resilience gets overused.
That's the thing with words because you want to know, okay, do I keep the word in because it means something to me? And will it mean something to a reader that maybe doesn't read a lot of poetry? But then you hear, oh, that word's a cliche. And so there's a, to me, as I write my writings, there's a delicate balance between what is a word that we can relate to, or is it a word that's maybe overused, like it, but maybe in the future will be considered a, um, a reference point word.
Hmm.
Like so, that's a tricky one. So it's interesting that you changed it. Um,
Yeah, it's not even, well, it is a cliche, but just about that. Rita Dove has its exercise that I love. I've used it so many times. Um, and one of the first thing you do to build your poem is you take a cliche or just an old saying, and then you change it in some way that makes it weird and refreshed. Another thing about weird, there's a poet here in Boston that I knew back when I lived in Pittsburgh, and I didn't remember him very well. He was younger, and I hung out with a lot of poets, and I felt bad, and I said, well, tell me something. And he said, you told me to be more weird. And that was really good advice. So I was like,
is
hey,
I think
I
that's the
did.
best advice that you can give a
Yeah.
new writer is to just be weird, be as creative and as funky as possible. Margaret, tell us where we can find your work. I believe you have a website.
Yeah. All the books, including the translations, I only have one poet that I've published with, and they're all have links to the press. So again, I use Amazon because my husband has a whatever, but they're all straight to the presses, so you can order from the press.
And your website.
MargaretYoungPoet.com.
So margaretyoungpoet.com. And I love the fact that you can be like the song Forever Young. Have you heard it?
Yes.
You've got the coolest name. I want it. Um, Margaret, thank you so much for spending the time with us today at Briar House Writes. And I really look forward to seeing your new collection. So it's going to be coming out in 2025 toward the end of this year.
Right now, or the latest I've heard was September. So it's about time to write because if it is, then I need to start arranging dates and things. But that's what he said. So I
Well,
will know more soon.
well, make sure you let us know and post that information on Briar House Writes Facebook group because we definitely want
Okay.
to encourage people to read it.
Okay.
And any videos that you have to promote it, please put them on our group page and we would love to see it. Well, thank you so much, Margaret, and hope you have a wonderful writing career. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.